Well, isn't this just spectacular? Another diplomatic mission to deal with the humans. Lucky me. I am Vax'nir, Senior Diplomatic Envoy of the Peloran Collective, and if you told me 50 years ago that I'd spend the twilight of my career babysitting talks with bipedal mammals from a watery backwater planet, I would have molted from laughter. Yet here we are. 50 years since first contact. 50 years since the humans pointed their primitive radio telescopes toward our ships and somehow managed to decode our transmissions. 50 years of their constant, relentless expansion throughout the local cluster. They call it making friends. We call it barely contained chaos. Don't misunderstand me. Humans have their charms, I suppose. They're resourceful little creatures. Their ability to survive despite their fragile bodies and complete lack of natural defenses is almost admirable. Almost. But they're emotional to a fault, unpredictable, and they insist on bringing their peculiar customs into every interaction. Shake hands, they say. Why would I want to touch their sweaty appendages? Have a drink with me, they suggest. As if their ethanol-based concoctions wouldn't dissolve my third stomach lining. And they're always smiling, showing their teeth like it's not a threat display. In primitives, fascinating primitives. Still, the collective's High Council sees value in these diplomatic relations. Humans may be technologically behind us by millennia, but they've developed some unique innovations. Their FTL drive designs are surprisingly efficient, and their agricultural techniques have applications even our scientists hadn't considered. Beginner's luck, obviously. So here I am, headed to Harmony Point Space Station for the Multi-Species Accords. 7 galactic powers will be present, including the Arcturian Confederation, represented by the living legend himself, Ambassador Grell'nak. And the humans, of course. Always the humans. The summit is expected to last 7 standard cycles. 7 cycles of pretending to be impressed by human achievements. With 7 cycles of explaining basic concepts of galactic politics to them as if to younglings. 7 cycles of diplomatic smiles and careful words. What could possibly go wrong? Harmony Point. Hey, the name alone deserves an award for misrepresentation. The station hangs in neutral space between Arcturian and human territories, a massive wheel of metal and composite materials spinning leisurely to create artificial gravity. It's an engineering marvel, I'll admit, though I'd rather eat my own sensory tendrils than say that to a human engineer's face. The docking procedures were tedious as always. Security scans, diplomatic clearances, the usual bureaucratic parade that makes one question the value of interspecies relations altogether. By the time I reached the Grand Conference Chamber, most delegations had already arrived. Ambassador Vax'nir, so wonderful to see you again. And there she was, Commander Talia Blackwood, Earth Diplomatic Corps. Her voice carried across the chamber with that peculiar human resonance that always sounds vaguely aggressive to Peloran ears. She approached with that strange human locomotion they call walking, all bouncy and inefficient. Commander Blackwood, the pleasure is mutual, I assure you. A diplomatic lie, but that's my job. Blackwood has a reputation among galactic diplomatic circles. Sharp mind hiding behind disarming smiles. Ruthless negotiator disguised as a friendly conversationalist. Dangerous, in the way only humans can be. She wears her dark hair pulled back tightly, and her blue uniform bears the insignia of Earth's United Space Command. I hope your journey was pleasant. Have you met everyone? She gestured around the chamber. The Zintaran delegation arrived just before you. I have not had the pleasure of greeting Ambassador Grell'nak yet, I said, scanning the room for the Arcturian. He's over by the viewport. Been there for hours, barely speaking to anyone. I followed her gaze. Even from across the chamber, Grell'nak was unmistakable. 8 feet tall, with the characteristic silver-blue scales of Arcturian nobility. His ceremonial mantle caught the light, the embedded gemstones representing his numerous accomplishments throughout 3 centuries of diplomatic service. He seems contemplative, I offered. Blackwood snorted. That's one word for it. Brooding might be another. He's not happy about the proposed trade routes through Sector 87. Claims it infringes on Arcturian historical claims. Does it? By about 3 light years, yes, but the route through Pellerin space would add 17 days to every journey. She shrugged. We're willing to compromise, but he's being stubborn. As we spoke, I noticed she absently touched a small device on her wrist. It projected a tiny holographic image for just a moment, a human male in similar uniform to hers, smiling broadly before she deactivated it. A colleague? I asked, pretending curiosity rather than calculated information gathering. Something flickered across her face. Captain Jasper Reynolds. He was a friend. Died 3 years ago during a joint human-Arcturian security operation gone wrong. Before I could inquire further, the summit's moderator, a neutral Zentauran, called the gathering to order. We all took our assigned positions around the massive circular table. I found myself seated between the Medusan representative and a junior human diplomat, whose name I immediately forgot. The opening statements were predictably dull. Each species emphasizing their importance, their needs, their generosity, and even considering compromise. Standard diplomatic posturing. But as the session progressed into specific negotiation points, I noticed a fascinating pattern. The humans kept deferring to technical experts, bringing in specialists for each topic, rather than relying solely on their diplomatic team. Every time they introduced a new face, the rhythm of the talks changed, forcing everyone to adjust. Ambassador Grell'nak's frustration grew visibly with each interruption. His scales darkened, an Arcturian sign of irritation, and his ceremonial mantle stiffened around his neck ridges. Must we entertain yet another human expert? He finally snapped after Blackwood introduced their xenobotanist to discuss agricultural exchange protocols. Do your diplomats know nothing, or is this an intentional delay tactic? Blackwood's smile never faltered. We believe in consulting those with direct knowledge rather than pretending to expertise we don't possess, Ambassador. Some might call it humility. The barb landed precisely where intended. Arcturians pride themselves on comprehensive knowledge. Suggesting they might benefit from humility was, well, let's just say the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. I settled back in my seat, suddenly finding the proceedings much more interesting. This wasn't going to be the dull diplomatic exercise I had anticipated after all. By the 3rd day of negotiations, you could practically taste the tension in the recycled station air. The Arcturians and humans had reached an impasse over the security protocols for the contested trade routes. Commander Blackwood insisted on joint patrols. Ambassador Grell'nak demanded exclusive Arcturian jurisdiction. The matter is non-negotiable, Grell'nak stated, his resonant voice echoing throughout the chamber. Arcturian space requires Arcturian protection. Your species has not proven itself capable of maintaining adequate security standards. Blackwood leaned forward, her posture relaxed yet somehow intensely focused. With all due respect, Ambassador, the proposed routes pass through contested regions. Joint patrols would benefit both our peoples. Benefit? Like the benefit of the Proxima incident? Grell'nak's scales rippled with dark patches, the Arcturian equivalent of a derisive sneer. I noticed Blackwood's hand twitch toward the holographic device on her wrist, though she didn't activate it. That was an unfortunate situation with complex factors, she replied evenly, and one we've learned from. Grell'nak rose to his full height, towering over the table. Learned? Your species repeats the same errors with predictable regularity. Your military commanders lack both foresight and competence. The human delegation exchanged glances. I sensed we were approaching dangerous territory. Perhaps we should take a brief recess, suggested the Zentauran moderator, clearly sensing the same. But Grell'nak wasn't finished. His mantle fully extended now, a display of dominance rarely seen in diplomatic settings. Your Captain Reynolds demonstrated this incompetence perfectly, did he not? Charging into Arcturian space with inadequate intel, ignoring proper protocols. He gestured dramatically. And what was the result? Dead humans, dead Arcturians, and a diplomatic mess that took months to untangle. If that is your standard of military excellence. The words died in the chamber, not gradually, but instantly, as if someone had pressed a universal mute button. I've attended over 300 diplomatic summits in my career. I've witnessed trade wars declared, insults exchanged between mortal enemies, even a Zentaran blood challenge. But I have never experienced a silence like that moment. It was absolute, consuming. Every breath held, every movement frozen. Commander Blackwood's reaction wasn't what I expected. No human outburst, no emotional display. She simply stopped. Like a machine powered down. Her face emptied of expression, eyes fixed on Grell'nak with a gaze so calculating, so utterly cold, that even I felt my circulatory pumps falter. The human delegation had gone similarly still. Not the stillness of shock, though. The stillness of predators deciding when and how to strike. Ambassador Grell'nak, Blackwood finally said, her voice soft yet perfectly audible. I believe we should continue this discussion tomorrow, when we've all had time to reflect on diplomatic professionalism. She stood without another word. Her delegation rose in perfect unison and followed her from the chamber. No slamming doors, no raised voices, no typical human emotional display at all. And somehow, that was infinitely more terrifying. What happened next was unexpected. In my 50 years of observing humans, I've learned to anticipate certain responses to provocation. Shouting. Threats. Perhaps even physical confrontation, though rarely in diplomatic settings. Humans are emotional creatures, after all. But Commander Blackwood and her team did none of these things. The following morning, the human delegation arrived at the conference precisely on time, perfectly groomed, utterly professional. Blackwood greeted everyone, including Grell'nak, with the same diplomatic smile she'd worn since day one. Did I miss something? I murmured to my assistant. I expected repercussions. Perhaps humans are more reasonable than we thought, she suggested. Hey, if only I'd been so naive. The first hint came during the mid-morning refreshment break. I overheard two human junior diplomats speaking with a Medusan representative near the nutrient dispensers. Reynolds was something else, one said, her voice carefully modulated to carry. Did you know he personally evacuated 27 Arcturian civilians during the Proxima incident? 29, corrected her colleague, pulling two hatchlings, carried them 3 kilometers through toxic atmosphere when his respirator was damaged. The Medusan's sensory tendrils quivered with interest. I hadn't heard this account. Oh, it's well documented. There's video footage in the station's historical database. Reynolds received the Stellar Cross for it posthumously. By lunchtime, similar conversations were happening throughout Harmony Point. In the communal dining area, the recreation deck, the observation lounges. Always casual. Always just loud enough to be overheard. Always mentioning Reynolds. And then came the linguistic maneuver. During the afternoon session, a human technical advisor addressed Grell'nak directly in perfect high Arcturian. Not the diplomatic pidgin most species use, but the complex ceremonial dialect reserved for Arcturian nobility. Ambassador, regarding the security protocols, the human said, the clicking consonants and tonal shifts flawlessly executed, we believe Captain Reynolds' defensive formation strategy from the Proxima operation would address your concerns while allowing for joint oversight. Grell'nak's mantle rippled with surprise. You speak the high tongue? Captain Reynolds insisted all officers under his command learn the basics. He held the Arcturian culture in highest regard. The human paused. He often said respect begins with understanding language. By the day's end, I noticed humans throughout the station conversing in Arcturian languages, not just with Arcturians, but with each other. Discussing Reynolds. Always Reynolds. In the diplomatic lounge that evening, I approached the Zentaran moderator. "These humans," I said, keeping my voice low. "They're conducting some sort of campaign." The Zentaran's eye membranes flickered their equivalent of a knowing smile. An elegant response, wouldn't you say? No rules broken. No diplomatic protocols violated. Yet everyone is discussing the very topic Grell'nak wanted to dismiss. But why? What's their objective? Truth, perhaps. The Zentarans sipped their fermented beverage. Did you know about Reynolds' actions on Proxima? I admitted I did not. He diverted his vessel to respond to a distress call from an Arcturian research outpost against direct orders from his superiors. The outpost had detected a stellar anomaly but couldn't evacuate in time. When radiation levels spiked, he personally led the ground team, saved dozens of Arcturian lives, including scientists, support staff, and their young. And Grell'nak disparaged this? Worse, he knows this story. Every Arcturian does. Their media covered it extensively. The implications settled uncomfortably in my digestive tract. The next morning brought another surprise. The Medusan delegation proposed a formal commendation of Captain Reynolds' actions be included in the final summit documentation. The Zentarans seconded it. My own superior indicated Pellerin support would be forthcoming. Throughout this, the humans said nothing, did nothing. They simply watched as, one by one, the other species aligned against Grell'nak's characterization. During the midday recess, I noticed Grell'nak sitting alone in the observation deck, his once imposing figure somehow diminished, his mantle pulled tight against his body. No one approached him. Even his own junior diplomats maintained distance. I passed Commander Blackwood in the corridor afterward. There was something different about her, a quiet satisfaction radiating from her like heat from a star. "Interesting developments today," I ventured. She smiled. Not the diplomatic smile, but something sharper, more genuine. "The truth has a way of finding daylight, Ambassador Vax'nir. Was that your strategy all along? To reveal the truth about Reynolds?" She stopped, considered me carefully. "Let me ask you something. If Grell'nak had insulted one of your fallen colleagues, what would the Pellerin response have been?" I didn't hesitate. Immediate severing of diplomatic relations, possibly worse. Exactly. Her eyes held mine. Sometimes the most devastating response isn't violence or outrage, but simply ensuring everyone knows exactly what happened. No embellishment needed. She continued down the corridor, leaving me with the uncomfortable realization that I had severely underestimated these humans. Her again. By the 5th day of the summit, Ambassador Grell'nak, the living legend, the diplomatic titan with 3 centuries of accolades, couldn't secure a seat at the communal dining tables. It was both fascinating and disturbing to witness. When he entered a room, conversations dimmed. When he approached a group, they found reasons to disperse. His own junior diplomats maintained professional interactions, but nothing more. Complete isolation, executed with exquisite politeness. During a particularly tense negotiation session, Grell'nak presented a reasonable compromise on the trade route security protocols. His points were logical, his delivery flawless. Yet when the moderator called for responses, the chamber remained silent for a full 30 seconds before a Medusan representative finally spoke, addressing their comments to Commander Blackwood rather than Grell'nak. Even I felt a twinge of sympathy for the Arcturian. Almost. That evening I found myself in the diplomatic lounge with representatives from most delegations except the Arcturians. The humans had provided a selection of their fermented grain beverages, which several species found palatable enough to risk digestive discomfort. Kay Thal, the senior Medusan diplomat, settled her floating communication pod beside me. Quite the diplomatic masterclass the humans are conducting, wouldn't you say? I've never seen anything like it, I admitted. Grell'nak is effectively neutralized without a single rule being broken. More than neutralized, added a Zentaran analyst, joining our conversation. His career is finished. The Arcturian Confederation is already preparing his replacement. I blinked all 3 eyelids in surprise, for a single inappropriate comment. That seems excessive. Cathal's translation pod emitted a sound like bubbling liquid Medusan laughter. A single inappropriate comment. Ambassador Vax'nir, he violated one of the few truly universal ethical principles. Explain. The Zentaran leaned forward. Honor for the fallen. Respect for those who can no longer defend themselves. Every sentient species we've encountered holds this principle sacred, though the expressions vary. We Medusans dissolve our dead in the ancestral pools, Cathal explained. To speak ill of one who has returned to the pool would be to pollute all Medusan memory. Zentarans carry memory crystals of our deceased, the analyst added. To mock one would be to corrupt the crystal. Another diplomat, a Regellian I'd met briefly during the opening ceremonies, joined us. For us, the dead become star matter. To insult them is to dim the stars themselves. And for humans? I asked. Their customs vary, but the principle remains, the Zentaran said. They say do not speak ill of the dead. Some believe the deceased watch over them. Others simply feel it's cowardly to attack one who cannot respond. I considered this. And Arcturians? That's the most damning part, Cathal replied. Arcturians revere their ancestors above all. Grell'nak didn't just violate human norms, he betrayed his own cultural principles. Through the lounge viewport, I spotted Grell'nak on the observation deck, alone, staring out at the stars. Even from this distance, his body language conveyed defeat. The following morning brought a new development. Grell'nak approached Commander Blackwood before the session began. I couldn't hear their exchange, but his formal posture and extended mantle indicated an apology ritual. Blackwood listened politely, then simply walked away mid-ceremony. The Arcturian stood frozen, the ritual incomplete, a devastating social humiliation. Later that day, he tried again with a formal written statement distributed to all delegations. The humans acknowledged receipt, but offered no response. By summit's end, Grell'nak's isolation was complete. The living legend had become a cautionary tale, all because he dared mock a human's dead friend. And the most troubling part? Every other species considered the punishment perfectly appropriate. The final day of the summit arrived. The multi-species accords were largely finalized, with only the ceremonial signatures remaining. By diplomatic standards, it had been a successful gathering, despite, or perhaps because of the Grell'nak situation. The central chamber was arranged differently for this concluding session. A circular stage had been prepared, with seating for all delegations arranged around it. The symbolism was clear: equality, unity, a new chapter in interspecies relations. Commander Blackwood requested to speak before the signing ceremony. The moderator granted her the floor. She stepped onto the stage, her uniform impeccable, her posture perfect. I expected platitudes about cooperation and mutual respect, standard diplomatic closure. I was wrong. Again. Before we formalize these accords, she began, her voice clear and controlled. I wish to address an outstanding matter. The chamber quieted instantly. Ambassador Grell'nak has questioned the competence and judgment of Captain Jasper Reynolds regarding the Proxima incident. As Captain Reynolds cannot defend himself, I will speak in his place. She activated a holographic projector. The image that appeared was not the smiling portrait she kept on her wrist, but a visual log recording. A damaged human shuttle. Emergency lights. Toxic atmosphere swirling visibly outside the viewport. "This is Captain Reynolds' final mission log," she said. The recording showed Reynolds, his face streaked with blood, addressing the camera. "Radiation levels are beyond acceptable limits. Structural integrity failing. We've secured 29 survivors. The last group is in the research facility's lower levels." His voice was strained but steady as he continued. "Primary rescue teams won't arrive for another 6 hours. These children won't survive that long. I'm going back in." Someone off-camera protested. Reynolds' response was firm. "That's an order. Prepare for emergency evacuation the moment I return with the children." The recording followed him through corridors filled with toxic gas to a sealed chamber where 3 young Arcturians huddled together, terrified. The chamber fell silent as we watched Reynolds carry them one by one through the failing structure, his movements growing visibly weaker with each trip. The final moments showed him securing the last child in the shuttle before collapsing. His final words, barely audible, "Get them home." Blackwood deactivated the projection. Captain Reynolds absorbed a fatal radiation dose during that rescue. He died 17 hours later in our medical facility. She paused. "One of those children was Grell'nak, hatched of Grell'nak." A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Grell'nak stood frozen in his place, his scales pale with shock. "Grell'nak is my clutch brother," he whispered. "Grell'nak is my nephew." "Yes," Blackwood confirmed. "The nephew who now studies at the Arcturian Science Academy. The nephew who would not exist today without Captain Reynolds' incompetence." Grell'nak's ceremonial mantle drooped, entirely a sign of absolute submission in Arcturian body language. His legs gave way, and he sank to his knees on the chamber floor. His voice cracked. "I did not know. I did not connect the child was so young. I never saw the human who his words dissolved into the keening sound Arcturians make in extreme distress." It was uncomfortable to witness, this complete unraveling of a being who had stood among the diplomatic elite for centuries. But no one moved to help him. No one offered comfort. This, I realized, was justice being served. The signing ceremony proceeded after a brief recess. Grell'nak was escorted from the chamber by his aides, his legendary composure shattered beyond repair. The Arcturian delegation continued with their second-in-command assuming signature authority. I found myself watching the humans with new appreciation. Throughout my career, I'd cataloged countless approaches to diplomatic conflict. The Zinterans favor subtle economic pressure. The Dusans deploy information warfare. My own people, the Pelorans, excel at leveraging alliances to isolate opponents. But humans? They weaponize truth. No embellishment, no manipulation, no violence. They simply ensure everyone knows exactly what happened and then allow consequences to unfold naturally. It's devastatingly effective because it requires no enforcement. Society itself delivers the judgment. During the signing, Commander Blackwood proposed an amendment to the Multi-Species Accords, a joint human Arcturian training program for emergency response teams to be named the Reynolds Initiative. It passed unanimously. Later at the reception, I overheard snippets of conversation from various diplomats. "Remarkable restraint," said a Zinteran. "Elegant execution," commented a Medusan. "Devastatingly effective," noted a Regellian. The subject of these comments mingled casually among us, these humans with their fragile bodies and short lifespans. I'd called them primitives, yet they had delivered a masterclass in sophisticated social dominance without firing a weapon or raising a voice. As I prepared to depart Harmony Point the next morning, I updated my official report to the Peloran Collective with a new recommendation: approach humans with increased caution. They appear emotional, but their strategies run deeper than we suspected. And whatever you do, never mock their dead. One standard year later, I found myself back in human space, but overseeing the official dedication of the Reynolds Memorial Bridge space corridor connecting human and Arcturian territories. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very trade route that sparked the summit conflict now carried the name of the human whose memory had reshaped galactic diplomacy. The observation deck of Unity Station, the newly constructed facility anchoring one end of the corridor, was packed with representatives from a dozen species. The atmosphere was surprisingly festive, with human refreshments being cautiously sampled by various digestive systems. Ambassador Vax'nir, Commander Blackwood greeted me, now adorned with additional insignia indicating a promotion. Wonderful to see you again. The pleasure remains mutual, I replied, and this time it wasn't entirely a diplomatic lie. An impressive achievement, this bridge. A collaborative one, she corrected, gesturing toward a figure standing alone near the viewport. I nearly spilled my decontaminated water substitute. Is that former Ambassador Grell'nak? Yes. He resigned his diplomatic position and requested assignment to the Reynolds initiative. He now trains emergency response teams. The once mighty Arcturian appeared diminished without his ceremonial mantle, yet somehow more substantial. He was engaged in what appeared to be technical discussion with junior officers of both species. A steep fall, I observed. Or perhaps a more meaningful path, Blackwood suggested. He personally requested to attend today. Our conversation was interrupted by the commencement of the dedication ceremony. Speeches were made. Commemorative transmissions exchanged. A holographic rendering of the bridge corridor illuminated, showing vessels already traversing the new route. As the formalities concluded, I noticed Grell'nak approaching a memorial plaque bearing Reynolds' image. He performed the Arcturian honor gesture, a ritual normally reserved for ancestors of one's own bloodline. Remarkable, I murmured. A living legend humbled into becoming a better person. Blackwood smiled. Sometimes the most valuable diplomatic lessons come from unexpected sources. Indeed. I've revised several chapters in our diplomatic training materials based on the Grell'nak incident. The younger generations of Peloran diplomats now study what we call the human memory factor in conflict resolution. Oh? Her eyebrow raised in that peculiar human expression of interest. And what does that entail? The recognition that your species possesses unusually long emotional memory, coupled with unexpected strategic patience. I allowed a touch of sarcasm to color my tone. Quite an inconvenient combination for those who might offend you. She laughed, that strange rhythmic human sound that still strikes my auditory receptors as vaguely threatening. You know, she said, there's a new saying circulating among the diplomatic corps, mock not what humans cherish, lest you become the cautionary tale. Sound advice, I agreed. Though I prefer my own formulation, beware the species that weaponizes truth and carries hollows of their dead. As my transport vessel departed later that day, I gazed out at the gleaming new corridor bearing Reynolds' name. A permanent reminder etched into the very fabric of space, ensuring the diplomatic catastrophe that befell the mighty Grell'nak would never be forgotten. Humans. Such fascinating primitives, with their emotional attachments and their deadly memories. I wouldn't underestimate them again.